Thank you for joining us. This is our first official webinar of the 2022 year. So yay, thanks for being here. Today we're going to explore effective strategies for addressing executive dysfunction. Let's move on to our agenda. We will give introductions. We have two panelists joining me today. I'll give you an overview into Learnfully's offerings and mission. Then we'll give you a review of executive functioning as a whole, move into executive dysfunction, and then give you some immediate grabs in terms of strategies for each executive functioning area or subskill. First, I'm Jess Corinne. I'm the head of educational services here at Learnfully. I started my career as a classroom teacher and then moved into working with Linda Bell Learning Processes, where I served as a clinician, a consultant, a school services consultant, a clinic director, and regional director. I really was able to refine the art of multisensory evidence-based remediation and implementation at that time. And then I started my private practice. I was born and raised in the Bay Area, and so I ventured into consulting with schools, a pediatrician, and saw so many learners directly. I was able to expand my repertoire and offer more differentiation and personalization. And that's what brought me to Learnfully. So I am so happy to be here. I feel like it's a privilege and honor to serve our mission. Joining me today is Dr. Sheila and Rachel. Sheila, I'll have you start with your introduction.
Hey, all right, thanks, Jess. So my name is Dr. Sheila Murphy. I actually started with children even before getting into the academic world. My three boys had learning challenges, and so struggled with them until I finally decided that I really wanted to go into education and become an advocate for neurodiverse learners. So that's what I did. Went back to school. And got my, ended up getting my doctorate degree, went into teaching, administration, district instructional coach, and loved every minute of it, but felt like I would make more of an impact working individually with learners and teachers and schools themselves directly. So that's how I got into the consulting, specifically for advocating for neurodiverse learners.
Great, go for it, Rachel. Thank you, Sheila.
Hi, my name is Rachel Leonard. I've been an education specialist working in the field of special education for over 20 years. I just love working with our neurodiverse learners, and I specialize in Orton Gillingham instruction for our learners with dyslexia, and also I've been supporting with executive functioning.
Fantastic, thank you. Let's move on to Learnfully. So Learnfully is a personalized platform of highly qualified and certified educational specialists who have training in multisensory evidence-based methodologies. So there's quite a multiplicity of offerings and programs that we have in our network, such as Linda Bell, Orton Gillingham, Step Up to Writing, Social Thinking, Making Math Real, you name it. It's definitely a differentiated approach. So our mission is to empower neurodivergent learners by helping them not only reach, but also realize their strong learning potential. And so that, as you can imagine, takes a tailored approach. We are constantly building out our content platform and allowing, of course, access to caregivers and educators alike to ensure that not only do we have proactive and consistent communication in place, but also they have access to reinforcers so that we can expedite progress and maintain momentum in between our instructional sessions. We serve schools, we consult with different practices as well for professional development. So we are really trying to maintain the learner-centered model while supporting their entire ecosystem at the same time. All right, so there's three key executive functioning areas. So let's start with an executive functioning overview. This is more of a review because I know that you may have seen our content in the past, some of our past webinars, but just so you have this as a foundation to stand upon as we move into strategies. So there are three kind of buckets, if you will, within executive functioning. As a whole, just so everybody is clear, executive functioning is like the CEO or the conductor of our brain. So it's housed in the front of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, and it's responsible for 8 subskills. So it's quite complex. It's very intricate, but there are 3 buckets that we're able to simplify the processes within. Working memory, which is relatively your short-term memory. You're holding on to that memory and being able to activate prior knowledge and retrieve information in order to utilize that memory in the future. Inhibitory control, which is your ability to regulate, maintain the kind of impulse control, if you will. And then cognitive flexibility. How do you take a moment, be able to work with the times, go with the flow, and not, act with immediacy when something goes your way or when you're faced with adversity, problems, and so forth. So you'll see on the other side is the 8 different component sub-skills within executive functioning. I like to look at executive functioning as like the precursor, because if these areas are not strengthened, developed, and applied, it's really difficult for your brain to then streamline aspects that are responsible for reading, language processing, comprehension, math, you name it. So since this is in the front of our brain, if learners are struggling with one or more of these tasks, it creates a stress fog, and it blocks that prefrontal cortex from communicating with the rest of the brain. So we find it imperative not only to treat executive functioning as a sole focus, but for those learners who are neurodivergent or facing challenges in and out of the classroom, oftentimes there is a comorbid approach where we find that executive functioning is also impacting some of their other learning pathways and skills. So big picture, the 8 areas are self-monitoring, so how you edit oneself, working memory, like I said, how you activate prior knowledge and hold on to that short-term memory, organization, planning and prioritization, time management skills, and of the like, emotional control, self-regulation, impulse control, flexible thinking, how you can kind of work on your toes and not react, but be able to problem solve with a little bit of calmness, which I think is troubling for a lot of us considering the times. And then task initiation and activation. So how you kind of launch into what you need to do to accomplish your daily operations, your daily happenings. Many of us have learners who struggle in these one or more of these areas, but also adults, right? I think we can all relate that we have many a times that we can experience some of these and we can relate to our learners who struggle in one or more of these areas. So that was fast, but it's just an overview because we're going to go right into executive dysfunction. I'm going to turn the mic to Sheila and she's going to help walk us through what executive dysfunction is.
All right. Thanks so much. I will apologize in advance. Had some donkeys hee-hawing, and so that makes the dogs howl. So
I love it. No worries.
So executive dysfunction. Essentially, we think about this as a term that describes the range of cognitive, behavior, and emotional challenges in alignment with the 8 executive functions that Jess just spoke of. And so these are things that we, even as adults, use each and every day. We know that organization, time management, self-regulation, these are all things that we use as adults, not just our learners. And some of us may struggle in some of these areas as well. So it's really just now looking at when there are areas of weakness, struggle, challenge, this is what we would call executive dysfunction. Individuals with executive dysfunction can struggle in many different ways. Regulating emotions is one of those ways. Planning, problem solving, organizations, again, these go back to the executive functionings and mirror them just with a challenge or struggle. Time management also being one. The challenge with executive dysfunctions is that they could lead to some emotional impacts. And so these can really cause a lot of frustration, exhaustion, embarrassment, isolation, because you don't want to go out and kind of present yourself to the world. Even as adults, if we have maybe some of these challenges, might be a reason that we tend towards introvert personalities more than extrovert. So these are things that we have to think about in our learners that even if they're adults struggling, it's going to be very obvious that we will have our kiddos struggling with some of these as well. The great news and why we're here today is that there are a lot of ways that we can teach our learners to overcome these dysfunctions. And in the meantime, we as adults can even learn some things in the meantime too. So
I love that. And I couldn't agree more.
I don't think anybody taught me more than my three boys growing up with learning challenges. And so truly believe that this is another aspect of, had we had these tools for them, even myself, I would have really benefited. So.
I love that. Thank you, Sheila.
Yeah.
Well, let's dive into the main event. So we're going to walk through each of the executive functioning skills, and then we're going to give you some immediate grabs, some simple strategies that are just as effective, even though they're simple, that you can utilize under each of these areas. And so we don't by any means want you to feel overwhelmed by the number of suggestions. We want you to take what you gravitate towards and really try just a few of these out one step at a time. It is truly all about the baby steps. We call them successive approximations. So small steps to big goals. And then we're going to send the recording to you. So you'll have access to this. You can take screenshots, whatever you need to help you and support your family, your classroom, to make the most of these strategies. So let's get started. We're going to start with emotional regulation, and Sheila's going to walk us through these strategies.
Yeah, excellent. So again, just to recap, emotional or self-regulation is really just that, of having a way to calm yourself in the face of fear or anxiety, anything like that. So a couple of the strategies that are really good to use are things like breathing exercises. Starfish, if you haven't used that one, is when you hold up your hand and you breathe in and then out, you go all the way around your hand. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is looking around in your environment and thinking about 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can touch or feel, 3 things that you can hear, 2 things that you smell, and 1 that you taste. And as you are having your learner think about these things, they have to focus on that instead of whatever it is might have them upset and angry, or whatever they might need regulating on. Another really important thing, just kind of popping down, zones of regulation are great just to have the vocabulary to talk to your learner about how they're feeling. Red being like, I'm feeling pretty out of control, I'm mad, I'm angry. And you know, looking through the different colors. Green, everything's good, feeling good. Blue, just like it says, you might be feeling a little down and sad about something. Yellow being frustrated and worried. So those are really good ways to give words to feelings. And then modeling. Modeling is so important about how we as adults think about regulating our own selves. So 2 super quick examples. One is, if you, let's say, go to the grocery store shopping, you buy a delicious cake and you get in the car and your kiddo's like, let's dive in and have just a little bite before we get home. And like, I would love to do that. But you know what? I think it's really important to go home, have our healthy dinner, and then treat ourselves with a snack afterwards. And helping model, instead of like, yeah, let's go grab some forks and dig in, helping to model that you need to regulate behaviors. And the other one, the other example, is thinking through the things that actually cause stress and anxiety for you. Let's say you're getting ready for a weekend trip. It's Friday. You got all these things on your mind, having a really hard time focusing and concentrating, and really talking that through with your learner to say, goodness, I'm having a really hard time focusing today. And like, what are some strategies that you're going to use today at school to keep yourself focused? I know you're excited about the trip too. Really having that metacognitive conversation about, you know, what are some strategies that both of you could use to keep yourselves calm and grounded. And so modeling is really important.
I love that. And I love that you started each of those modeling scenarios with validation. So you validate, yes, I mean, I'm feeling very stressed by having to pack all this stuff, or yes, I want to get a fork too, right? And that's just as important as modeling, because it just normalizes their feelings and their emotions and energy levels. So I appreciate you for saying
Absolutely.
that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the others, we're going to talk about games. So we'll go on to the next impulse control, because games are
Mm,
equally important for this one. And so it was definitely on self-regulation, but it's here again. So if
hmm
your learner struggles with impulse control, they struggle with waiting their turn, waiting and interrupting, things like that. These are some strategies that you can use to help them think about think about it in different context, in a safer context.
mm.
So playing some games like Simon Says, freeze tag, Mother May I, musical chairs, those can be really challenging for kiddos, because if you didn't get the chair, and you're a competitive person, that can be a challenge. And so having them practice these skills, I know some adults that get pretty crazy playing musical chairs, and so helping them to understand that it's just a game. Um, the other thing is, you want games that, or you want to also choose some games that are really fast paced and action packed, because those keep their focus really onto the game. And so practicing skills that focus their attention is really important. Having visual cues and reminders also goes along with a predictable schedule, which is a little bit lower. And the reason that's really important is because oftentimes when students struggle with impulse control, they're kind of popping up to ask questions. When are we doing this? What time do we leave here? When is science? What are we doing next? So to prevent these impulsive questions, you can have a visual, you can have visual calendars, you can have visual cues of, a little person sitting in their desk smiling to remind them, like, we stay seated in our desks during school time. Another great example is, oftentimes impulse controls challenged kiddos will hop out of the car as soon as the car stops, having a little picture of a, it's healthy to wait, or it's safer to wait, or something like that, so that they can remember that these are the things that are expectations, and so they're not jumping into unsafe situations. Reducing clutter is just really important anyway. And I don't think that
Yes.
needs any
Yeah.
explanation.
I
Um,
think, there's a lot of, visual noise that comes up in our lives. And so modeling that is also important. But again, I'm saying this more to remind myself as a mother of four, but phrasing some of these reminders in a positive light. Like sometimes my
Absolutely.
son is completely struggling with this, and he will try to jump out of the car. When we get somewhere,
Yeah.
he'll forget that it hasn't turned off, or that we haven't unlocked the door, or whatever. And and so I just need to like calm myself down, regulate first, and then say, okay, remember, or have that picture, by the door would be so helpful to maintain positivity and peace in that moment when, it's happened
Absolutely.
50 times before. So,
Right. And then you using, the reward system, so going kind of back up into the list and thinking about the reward system and having
mhm.
rewards. And like, I'm so excited that you thought to wait before you hopped out of the car this time. That's so much safer. Thank you for thinking about that. And really thinking about, like, what are some of, what are one or two areas that are important that you can set up a reward system for, and it can just be positive language, right?
Mhm.
So I'm going to praise you every time I notice. Kids love praise. And so reward systems work for most kids, but not all. And that's another really good way to reinforce impulse control.
I love that. Thanks for that. All right. Flexible thinking. I'm so excited to hear your suggestions here.
Flexible thinking. Yeah. Talk about one sometimes grown-ups are having a hard time with, huh? So flexible thinking, again, the games work for this one also. So I'm not going to go over games, but the one thing I will say is I thought was really fun about games in flexible thinking is changing the rules and doing things different than they've done before. And so helping kids to understand it's not the be all end all if we've always played it this way, but this time we're going to play it this way, and just get them practicing thinking about things differently. So some of the other things that are really important with flexible thinking is that your learner always understands what's happening. Why are they learning a certain thing, either at home or at school? Why does it matter? The why. Start with the why. It's very important so that it doesn't feel obscure to them, and they can ground it in something. And so it's really important to support that with them. Strategic and logical games are really important, but always having the metacognitive process going on about, why are you thinking that? What made you decide to do it that way? Do you think there's any other ways to do it? Have you seen anyone do these things differently? So lots of questions about what other opportunities for not just one right answer, and doing that throughout your day. Jokes and wordplay. It's really important that, and challenging for some students that, things are very linear in one way, and there's one right way and one right answer. And the jokes sometimes do plays on words. And so that kind of shows them that there's more than one way to use a word. The books, the Amelia Bedelia books, are really fun for that, because one of the examples is, she was asked to draw the curtains, and so instead of opening the curtains, she got a piece of paper and drew the curtains. And her book, all of those books are just beautiful masterpieces of what does it look like? What does wordplay look like? And there's more than one way to use words and take something in. And so having those conversations are really important. Praising and noticing when flexible thinking is happening, because some of those kiddos are very stuck in one right way. So really bringing it to the surface when it does happen.
Yeah. And also, just to add to that, praising them, but having them repeat back to themselves, right? So we can provide the positive affirmation, but starting to train them on affirming themselves for thinking that way, fills their bucket and brings them joy. But these suggestions are phenomenal. And I really strongly suggest that you take a screenshot of this one, because there's a lot here to digest, but it's all really effective and simple to apply. So again, just pick one or two at a time to try. Again, there's also a lot of overlap between.
And one I did not even put on here and just thought about with visualizing your kiddos and sitting around the dinner table and talking about what's one thing that didn't go well today.
Yeah.
And having that conversation about, and it could be with somebody else. You saw something go askew with someone else, a friend, a sibling, whatever, and then how did they handle it? So it kind of takes the onus off of them, but they observed this other thing going on. And I think that's so powerful. And what are some other ways that it could have been handled or whatever, but just using the dialogue, I think, is really important.
I love the use of the dinner table and the car because they can't escape, but also, right, modeling. Like, hey, this didn't go my way today, and this is how I handled it. Do you think I could have handled it any differently? Or even mocking that up, if you did handle it correctly, but then give them some examples on how you felt like you could have handled it, so they can problem solve alongside with you and feel like you can relate to them.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you, Sheila.
Yeah.
Okay, Rach, you're going to dive into some organization. Let's do it.
Yes, one of my favorite things and much needed by my learners. And so I love working in this area. One of the key strategies I just think is great as a whole, in definitely even in a lot of the things that Sheila was talking about, is explicitly teaching skills and practicing together in that modeling component. So something that, as I talk about some of the other strategies, these are things you can definitely do together. So one of my favorite strategies is the weekly meeting. I call this even for my own self, my weekly meeting with myself, where I am organizing, I'm cleaning my materials, I'm making sure I'm filing my papers. I don't have a backpack anymore, but this is what you would do with your learners. You would spend some time weekly cleaning out that backpack, making sure the papers, well, first of all, that you see the papers, that's always something. And second of all, that you just have those papers in the right folders and organized and what needs to be turned in still, et cetera. And also, with remote learning, we often, our spaces are cluttered. And Sheila talked about that again, making sure our desk is organized, cleaned. We have everything where we need it and we know where we can find those materials. Really important. Along with that weekly meeting, it also is a time to create an agenda. And you would look at the month with your learner, and you would put on the month, what are those important things? When do you have your practices? When do you have all those different components? And then taking a look and see what do we have for the week and really focusing on the week. It's a great way to start off. A lot of my learners, I do this on Monday. I do this with my own children on Sunday before school starts. We look at the whole week. So I highly recommend that strategy. Goodness. Color coding, love color coding. You can do this with their materials at home, even the things in their own bedroom. Legos go in the blue bin and, these toys go in the green bin, whatever works for your children. And then also color coding, as we have our older learners too, content areas, social studies may be blue with a blue binder and a blue folder, and I always did math was red for some reason. And so, whatever works for your learner. I even have my learners, they like to pick their own colors and we order things together and we send the list, so just some great strategies there.
I love that. And just to back you up on that, even when I'm consulting with schools, I train the teachers to color code the different subjects and try to have a universal theme throughout the lower school or the upper school, what have you. So every year they know that green composition notebook is for writing, that blue one is for math or what have you. And then just to add to that, I asked them to take a picture of the desk before it becomes all cluttered and disorganized. So they have a visual reminder. We do that at schools, but I also do it at home. We have a little picture of their backpack rack and things like that. I clearly miss being in a school. But that just gives them a visual cue and really settles their anxiety about what the expectation is. They can trust it, it's secure, and it stabilizes their processes in the future. It systematizes it.
Yeah, 100%. And I love that. I know that these were things that some of my teachers used to do, and I still carried it on when I taught in the classroom, and I do it with my own stuff. So it's just, it's a great skill to have.
It's great. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Planning and prioritizing. I know that many learners and adults can struggle with this. What kind of strategies do you recommend?
Well, I think the first biggest thing we have to look at is when we have projects and assignments or jobs, breaking those things into smaller components. And I think that we can model this as well. Okay. And working on your, explicitly teaching this with your child or your learner, breaking those projects into smaller parts and then doing the smallest parts or the easiest parts first and building up, strengthening their confidence as they get through one step and moving on. Also, my favorite thing are those to-do lists and making sure that you're modeling and you're working with your learner on checking off those things. And that can help build self-esteem. It's a great thing to do.
And if you don't mind me interjecting, I've read a research paper on the importance of to-do lists. And you know how us adults sometimes go back and add things to our to-do list to check off? Well, that's because your brain is releasing the happy neurotransmitter dopamine. And so our learners who struggle in this area of executive functioning, they don't have the opportunity, the win, the victory of getting that happy neurotransmitter release because they never check things off. And so I think there's many reasons why to-do lists are important for everyone in our community.
For sure. And that ties into one of my other favorite strategies for planning and prioritizing are priority Post-its. This is where you'll take a Post-it note and you have one that just says daily tasks, must do deadlines, overdue tasks, and would like to do. put it on the wall or your whiteboard. And then each task for the week or for that homework, whatever they have during that week, and you put it up there, and then you help your learner adjust. Is this a daily task? Is this a must do? Is this something that's overdue? And then help them prioritize what needs to be done first, second, third, so forth. Okay.
I love that. And would you have different colors for each?
I would recommend different colors. I think that really helps a lot of my learners. It helps myself as well, and helps them visualize too. So you've got that, pink, those are the overdue. I need to do those now, And
hopefully the overdue is like their favorite color, so they don't have the association.
Right?
Like, okay, I'm going to be calm about this because I see magentas on the wall.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it's good also to have those deadlines written on there with the assignment, and you would do one Post-it per assignment. So then again, as you do it, you can take it right off the wall. Like it's again that building that self-esteem, that positive. I've completed this, so
I love that.
And then helps them learn to sort and prioritize themselves too. I think and again, this is something you model, you work together to do.
And I also like to, and this is just mainly for older learners, but ask them to estimate how much time the tasks will take them. So when they're chunking it out on their calendar or they're walking through their own to-do list, and then maybe we don't necessarily set a timer and make it super stressful, but give them some introspective reflection time so that when they are starting to be more independent in these tasks, they know how to chunk some of these things themselves and realistically can estimate how much time they'll take. So they're not loading too much on their own plate. So
for sure.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. Self-monitoring.
All right. Self-monitoring. I was reflecting as Sheila was sharing about that impulse control, and this just led to a lot of these great strategies on here too. And the positivity. So, is it coming?
I don't know what's going on. We're just having some technical difficulties.
Go.
Don't you worry. There we go. I'm self-monitoring. You're go for it. Green light.
Yeah. So I think the one thing that really is great for our learners to see is creating a checklist based on the different situations that maybe your learner might be struggling with appropriate actions and behaviors. Kind of like what Sheila was even saying, like, this is when I'm at my desk, I have the picture, the smiley face, so for your older kids, you can have checklists, you can have visuals, those kinds of things, just to help your model and show your learners, okay, I'm at my desk, this is what needs to be here. When I go to that center, I used to do different red light, green light, yellow lights for noise level, things like that can really help our learners know and self-monitor. Ooh, it's yellow, I need to be a little quieter, those types of things. Another great strategy is role play and modeling. You can find so many different scripts out there for modeling different situations and social situations to help with those self-monitoring. Books, there's so many great books out there just to help work with some of these things. My Mouth is a Volcano is one of them. It's just absolutely wonderful to use. And then, another thing that I think is really good is just, this is kind of tied in with the parent, teacher, student communication, is where the learner themselves is inputting their data collection sheets. And then you're having that conversation, you're keeping that relationship, and they're knowing that everybody's on their team to work on some of these self-monitoring strategies. And that can include, parts where you have a little bit of that impulse control journal. You're writing a little bit about what happened in this situation. Why did that happen? You're setting some goals there. They have that visual, and you can also, incorporating that progress chart to see as they have that communication journal.
I love that. Yeah. I think some of our learners, as we're teaching them, as they grow in this area and we're teaching them how to edit their academic work, I think one thing, like you mentioned, that would really help is when they start editing a peer's work. I know this was mentioned before, but you alleviate the stress of self-judgment and editing yourself by allowing them an example of someone else that unrelated, they don't know, you find it off the internet, and they go through and they edit their work first. And then it starts to ingrain some of that reflection academically. So I think that's another good suggestion to throw onto this list. So.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. As far as like rubrics, things like that, model pieces, not so great pieces, of writing. So I'm glad you mentioned that, Jess.
Yeah. And it goes along with modeling. Like they're basically being modeled how to edit. But just in case teachers are looking for, ways to help with editing work, you can start with peer editing because it relieves a little stress. Okay. Working memory. Okay, this is one of my absolutely favorite executive functions, so I'm glad that I had the opportunity to share on it. Working memory is pretty complex. In fact, I personally wrote a blog on it. So if you still feel like you need some clarity around working memory after this presentation, feel free to grab the blog and review it. It goes into deeper understanding and really some techniques within. One of my absolute favorite things to do to strengthen working memory is to use visualization in every capacity. So our brain really takes in information, whether it be oral or written, and translates information into visual representations or mental pictures. And sometimes our learners are blank slates. They don't imprint, they don't create pictures, but in order for us to effectively activate working memory and exercise it with efficacy, we need to be cognizant and aware of our visualization skills. So throughout these strategies, the thread is make them aware, bring it to a level of consciousness for them. Ask them when they're reading a chapter book what the main character looks like. Ask them some prompted, cued questions like, where do you picture this taking place? What colors do you see? What's in the background? Even use it for we talked about this in a previous webinar around using it for strengthening imprinting by holding out cards with letters on it. It can be a sight word. It can be a spelling pattern. It could be a math fact. And then take that away and ask them what they saw. And then actually ask them sometimes to close their eyes and hold that picture and then ask them questions about it thereafter. So not only are they memorizing and cramming information, but they're having to retain it and hold on to it with enough memory and activating that visualization to really be able to embark academically, social, emotionally, be able to interact with their peers, comprehend what they're reading or listening to, and really process information as a whole. So that's where the multisensory piece comes in. That's where active reading comes in, because you're questioning them as they're reading about that mental movie they're making in their mind. And you're just bringing it to a conscious level so they're aware that their brain is a camera or a blackboard, a whiteboard, and it's taking pictures and then storing it in a Rolodex in their brain so that they can retrieve it and activate it later to make connections as they grow and learn. So that's a lot of this technique. Memory games are the same thing, right? You're going to play memory games. You're going to turn them over. They flip over the cards. They have to take a picture of where those cards were, put them back down, and then go back to it minutes later after everybody else has had their turn. So it's the same idea. And I think the concrete theme here is to anchor their understanding that their brain takes pictures and then apply that to these strategies and beyond. Task initiation. This is a little tricky. I know all these can be a little hairy depending on your learner. But task initiation, it doesn't necessarily say that we should have activation here too, but learners can activate internally, right? But it's their actual ability to execute upon that. Like they can be energized. I mean, I live in energy, right? Like they can be energized, but it doesn't mean they're always following through. They're always initiating tasks. To be completely honest, they might not know where to start. And so just to mirror what Rachel said about the color coding system, as a previous classroom teacher and one who has neurodivergent learners myself, I really appreciate a system that is color coded that can then be woven throughout different strategies. So using her example of green, yellow, red, where a learner, your child, whoever, adults, like they're aware of when they put down the green card that they're ready to launch. They can activate, they can initiate, they know what they need to do, they know the directions to follow. And then if they're feeling a little stuck, then they put down the yellow card. Like they're doing their homework at the homework table. We have these cards on my homework table. And then we can walk around and be like, why are you still sitting here? What are you doing, sweetheart? Oh, the yellow card. Okay, let me help you. And red is like dead stop, right? They don't know what to do. They're lost. It just starts training them not only to self-monitor, but then to be aware that they can initiate if they're in the green or the yellow. I love the idea of showing empathy, providing incentives. Those incentives can even just be praise, like you said. They don't have to be monetary. We give my children tallies for like an extra minute of screen time on the weekends, or they get tallies and they get like a quarter. Like it doesn't have to be any big prize, but if they're able to initiate and complete, and then again, initiate and follow through to turn in their assignments, they're going to get some of that positive affirmation, which then in turn kind of encourages them and motivates them to try to initiate in the future, although it's not always that easy, as we know. Normalizing the behavior and avoiding the nagging. Ooh, this is hard. As a parent and as an educator, it's very, very hard as teacher mom to not like say, okay, what's going on? But it's super important that we take a step back, take perspective, center ourselves, find the grounding, and then say, okay, I know this is hard. Validate, be positive, but then circle back to strategies and observations that you're making so that they can feel seen and heard, but at the same time feel like they have something immediately that they can take with them in order to monitor and launch their own behaviors. I could talk about this for hours. I am so grateful that each of you shared today. We're going to talk a little bit about our process because we have quite a few learners who come through our platform, as I said, who either need a focus in executive functioning solely or they need like a dual approach. We're working on something like literacy and executive functioning at the same time. It's extremely important to us to get a lens, the caregiver lens, get feedback from a parent, caregiver, and educator before launching our and taking initiative to do an assessment. So we start with a caregiver or survey or questionnaire. We have a discussion with you. We want to learn all about your learner through your eyes. And then we recommend one of our differentiated learning assessments. So we can do a cognitive measure, an executive functioning measure, a literacy and or math measure, because we want to make sure that it's tailored and personalized to your learner and you get the most out of the information that we provide during our consultation and our learning plan debrief. That's where we sit down with you. We talk about your survey results in conjunction with the learner's results, talk about the learner impact in and out of the classroom, their strengths, their interests, and the areas that we need to work on, challenge them to improve so that they can, again, thrive and reach their potential overall. Assessment starts for $2.99, and then we move into educational therapy and remediation intervention. The rates can vary, but we're now having a promotion for $100 a session, depending on the intensity, the package you purchase, using one or more of these methodologies. Again, all of our specialists are certified, trained, or have credentialing in one or more of these programs, so they are able to provide this level of high quality intervention. And then we have academic tutoring. So those who don't necessarily need educational therapy, remediation, intensity can then qualify for academic tutoring, where they go through the process of generalization, carrying over their skills into academic school-oriented tasks. Perhaps they started with educational therapy, they laid a strong framework to stand upon, and then we're helping them carry over their skills into homework application. We also have executive functioning coaching, of course. This is our class where we have cohorts of like-minded, like needs students, and then they get together in a small group setting, and we go through the overview or introduction of executive functioning. And within that, we have breakout one-off sessions. So they might start in a small group at the beginning of the week, and then we personalize and have check-ins with them throughout the week to ensure that we're meeting their needs and they're able to apply what we covered at the beginning of the week in the small group. And last but not least, we have study skills and test prep. So this is not necessarily how do you study for the SAT. That could go into our tutoring bucket. This is more so giving you the underlying skills you need to be able to study efficiently and effectively and be able to take a test with confidence and feelings of success. So this is more of an executive functioning / academic tutoring program that's appropriate for middle and high school students as they're really gearing up on the frequency and duration of exams that they need to execute upon. That about does it. I am so glad that you joined us today. Thank you so much for being here. And again, we will share this recording with you so you can go back, revisit the strategies, take snapshots, contact us if you have absolutely any questions that were unanswered. If you have questions about our programs or our process, we are here to support you. You can email us, call us, follow us on socials, whatever you're privy to. We appreciate the support and look forward to seeing you again. Thanks so much, everybody, for presenting. We appreciate your time. Take care.